The Morning Midas is now at the bottom of the Pacific, and while it might not be a surprise to you if you've been following this fire, here's the real question. Were electric vehicles to blame? You found Stashed. I'm Pat, firefighter, mechanical engineer, and battery guy. Just a quick recap. Just about 3 weeks ago on June 3rd, 2025, the Morning Midas caught fire. It was loaded with vehicles in China and it was headed to Mexico. This was a ro-ro ship, short for roll on, roll off. Ships like this have multiple decks and they're basically wide open inside, with thousands of cars parked tightly together. According to the crew, when the fire initially started, it started on a deck that carried electric vehicles. Ultimately, they had to abandon ship shortly after that fire broke out, but I'll come back to that. First, I'll walk you through the timeline of events and some of the details surrounding the sinking. Let me start out by saying I'm not an expert in the maritime world, but I did spend a good chunk of my life living about a block away from the Soo Locks, one of the busiest lock systems in the world, and I got pretty familiar with the Great Lakes freighters and the shipping industry through the Great Lakes. If you want a more detailed look at this incident, head over to Sal's channel, What's Going On with Shipping. He's got a great update on the salvage efforts and everything that happened after the fire. This ship sank somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, about 350 miles off the coast of Alaska. Now, a lot of people think that sounds pretty close, but in the ocean, that's days or even weeks away. It actually took about 6 days for the first salvage vessel to reach the scene. When it arrived on June 9th, they reported that there were no signs of the ship taking on water or any pollution. Although video from the Coast Guard does seem to show an oil slick in the water. That could be from the smoke residue, paint, or other material from the ship settling into the ocean. On June 16th, a second tug arrived and took over control of the abandoned vessel. By then, it looked like the fire had burned itself out. It wasn't producing any more smoke or flames. They were still waiting on a long-range tow vessel, which was at least another week away. When I initially covered this story, I did question whether this ship would sink. And that's because a vessel like this, when it catches on fire, there's a lot that can go wrong. First, the fire and intense heat can cause serious damage to the structural integrity of the hull. Critical systems can fail, and it can become really easy for that vessel to start taking on water. In this case, they were fortunate. That didn't appear to happen right away. You can see significant damage throughout the hull, and even the bridge appears to have burned, but the ship maintained its integrity at least for a few more days. The second issue, and this one's a much larger concern, the cargo. Over 3,000 vehicles were on board. All were originally secured with nylon straps. But after a fire like that, those restraints are gone. Now you've got thousands of vehicles sitting loose inside a mostly open interior. Once the seas get rough, that load can shift, and when that happens, the ship will start to list, water can come in, and game over. That's exactly what happened here. On June 24th, today, the Morning Midas sank in about 16,000 feet of water. The official cause? Heavy weather, which led to the vessel taking on water. This marks the 9th car carrier lost in the last 10 years. Now, the big question here, did an electric vehicle cause this fire? Unfortunately, we only have the initial crew reports available at this time, and at this time they do say it started in a deck that contained electric vehicles. But here's one thing I know for certain. If this fire had involved a traditional combustion engine vehicle, the crew caught it early and they did everything the right way, they likely would not have had to abandon ship. But when it comes to electric vehicles, they just don't have the tools they need to stop a fire like that. You can't stop thermal runaway by flooding a compartment with CO2. If you want to learn more, check out my initial video on this fire. A lot of people did comment that I should wait for the official report. But realistically, will that give us any more information than we already have? The ship is now sitting at the bottom of the ocean, makes it pretty difficult for an investigation. But the bigger issue I look at is time. I'm going to report on the best information available when the incident happens, because in reality, some of the incidents I've been following happened years ago, and they still have no official reports released. And here's something that might surprise you about an incident like this. There may never be a formal investigation, which means we may never know.